Olivia Bennet was never the daughter her parents, Jonathan and Catherine Bennet, had envisioned. Born into the prestigious Bennet Motors dynasty, Olivia was expected to uphold the family tradition of running one of the most well-established luxury automobile brands in the country. The Bennet family had built their empire over 3 generations, expanding their business from a small auto repair shop in the 1950s to a multi-billion-dollar industry giant with showrooms across the United States. Their brand was synonymous with prestige, innovation, and legacy, values that Jonathan drilled into both of his children, Olivia and her younger brother, Ryan. From the moment she was old enough to understand, Olivia knew that she didn't belong in the world her parents had carved out for her. She was not passionate about cars, nor was she interested in finance, corporate acquisitions, or brand expansions, while her father spent his days training Ryan in the mechanics of business. Olivia spent hers sketching interior designs, researching sustainable materials, and dreaming of creating beautiful, eco-friendly spaces. Her mother, Catherine, dismissed her interests as a childish hobby, something she would eventually grow out of. Her father, Jonathan, was far less tolerant. He believed that passion had no place in business, that success was built on strategy, discipline, and legacy. He reminded Olivia, time and time again, that family came before personal ambition. Ryan, the younger of the two, had always been their parents' golden child. He was the perfect heir, charismatic, ambitious, and eager to inherit the company. Jonathan personally mentored Ryan, grooming him to one day take over Bennet Motors. Olivia, on the other hand, was considered a liability, an outsider within her own family. No matter how hard she tried to prove herself, she was always reminded that she was not a priority in their carefully structured world. The final straw came on Olivia's 27th birthday. By then, she had earned a degree in architecture and interior design, hoping that her parents would recognize her ambition as something worth supporting. Instead, her father ignored her graduation entirely, insisting that she should stop wasting time and accept her place at Bennet Motors. The family had planned for her to work in financial strategy, a role she had no interest in. During a family dinner at their luxurious Hamptons estate, Jonathan and Catherine made their final ultimatum. "It's time to stop playing around, Olivia," her father said, setting down his glass of wine. "You either take the position we've arranged for you, or you are no longer a part of this family." The air in the room grew thick. Olivia felt her hands tremble, not with fear, but with the overwhelming realization that she had never truly belonged in this family. She had spent years trying to win their approval, only to be reduced to an asset, a tool for the business, instead of a daughter. She looked around the table, at her father's cold stare, her mother's forced smile, and Ryan's smug confidence. They had already decided for her. She was meant to either fall in line or be erased from the family history. With a slow, deep breath, Olivia made her choice. "I'm not taking the job." Her voice was calm, yet firm. Jonathan's expression darkened. "Then you are on your own." Catherine let out a sigh, shaking her head as if she had lost all hope in her daughter. "You're making a mistake, Olivia." Ryan, barely containing his smirk, leaned forward. "Good luck paying your rent without Dad's money." It was a public execution, a formal rejection of her existence. That night, Jonathan filed the paperwork to officially remove Olivia from the family trust fund. The next morning, her name was erased from all company records. She was locked out of the family's properties, credit accounts, and business dealings. Her financial access was revoked, leaving her with barely enough in her personal savings to cover a few months of expenses. She was no longer a Bennet, at least, not in the way her family defined it. As she packed her bags and walked out of the estate for the last time, Olivia refused to cry. She refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. They believed she would fail, that she would come crawling back in 6 months, a year at most, begging for their forgiveness. But they had no idea what Olivia Bennet was truly capable of. They had just severed ties with the one person who would one day control everything they had built. When Olivia Bennet walked out of her family's estate with nothing but a suitcase and an unshakable determination, she had no safety net, no grand plan, and no financial backing. All she had was her passion for interior design and the belief that she was meant for something far greater than what her family had envisioned for her. The transition was harsh. She moved into a tiny one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, far removed from the luxurious estate she had grown up in. Overnight, she went from a life of wealth and comfort to one of uncertainty and struggle. Gone were the chauffeur-driven cars, the designer wardrobes, and the extravagant vacations. Now, her days were spent navigating subway rides, working multiple part-time jobs, and living off cheap instant ramen while sketching designs late into the night. Despite the difficulties, she never once regretted leaving. She threw herself into learning everything there was to know about sustainable interior design. She spent countless hours researching eco-friendly materials, studying innovative architecture, and understanding the science behind upcycling, while her family viewed her departure as a tragic waste of potential. Olivia saw it as an opportunity to prove them wrong. Knowledge became her greatest investment, one that no amount of money or privilege could buy. Determined to build something of her own, Olivia took a leap of faith and launched her own design company. Bennett Interiors was born from nothing more than an online portfolio and a blog where she shared her thoughts on modern, sustainable design. With no advertising budget, no investors, and no office, she worked tirelessly from her tiny apartment, using a second-hand laptop and reaching out to potential clients one by one. Most people dismissed her immediately, unwilling to trust an unknown, independent designer with their projects. But Olivia had something few others did: an unmatched persistence. She started small, offering her services to local businesses, boutique hotels, and independent cafes. She charged less than half of what larger firms did, just to get her foot in the door. Her first breakthrough came when she transformed a struggling coffee shop in Soho into a cozy, eco-friendly space that quickly became a local favorite. The owner, impressed by her creativity and work ethic, recommended her to other business owners, and word of mouth began to spread. Within a year, she secured her first major client, a growing tech startup looking for a sleek, sustainable office redesign. That project alone paid her more than she had made in an entire year of part-time work. Rather than celebrating, Olivia reinvested everything back into her business. She hired an assistant, upgraded her equipment, and moved into a modest but professional office in Manhattan. Her company was still small, but it was growing. She was no longer a struggling freelancer, she was a businesswoman. One step closer to proving that she could succeed on her own terms. The real turning point came in her third year. Though she had built a respectable reputation, she found herself hitting a wall. Large corporations dominated the industry, and clients were hesitant to entrust million-dollar projects to an independent designer. Then came a rare opportunity. A major hospitality brand was planning to launch a new line of eco-friendly hotels and was searching for a designer who specialized in sustainable interiors. It was the perfect project for Olivia. But there was one problem: the company only worked with well-established firms. Instead of backing down, she did something bold. She secured a meeting with the CEO and walked in with a fully developed proposal, complete with 3D models, sustainability reports, and a comprehensive vision for the hotels. She knew she was at a disadvantage, so she made sure her pitch was flawless. The CEO, initially skeptical, was blown away by her expertise and passion. That meeting resulted in a $2.5 million contract, the largest deal Olivia had ever signed. It was a game changer. Overnight, she went from a small-time designer to a rising star in the industry. Her work on the hotel project gained national attention, and soon, she was being featured in major architectural publications. Invitations to speak at industry conferences began rolling in, and her client list expanded to include high-end brands and luxury real estate developers. By year 5, Bennett Interiors was no longer just another design firm. It was a recognized leader in sustainable design. By year 7, her company had crossed $35 million in annual revenue, expanding to 3 major cities. She had a full team of designers, architects, and project managers, and her company had become the go-to firm for businesses looking to integrate sustainability into their spaces. She was no longer just proving her family wrong, she was redefining an entire industry. Then came the ultimate moment of irony. One morning, she opened her inbox and saw an email from Bennett Motors. Her family's company was reaching out with a business proposal. The very people who had cast her aside, erased her from their legacy, and told her she would fail, were now seeking her expertise. Their company was struggling to keep up with evolving trends, and they needed a designer to modernize their showroom spaces to reflect a more sustainable brand. They had no idea they were reaching out to the very daughter they had disowned. She read the email twice, then laughed. The irony was almost too perfect. They had assumed she would fade into irrelevance. Yet here she was, more successful than they had ever imagined. The girl they had mocked for rejecting their legacy had built one of her own, one that was thriving while theirs was struggling to survive. They had no idea that she now controlled something far greater than their company. For the first time in her life, Olivia felt truly free. She no longer needed their approval, their validation, or their acceptance. She had built her own empire, on her own terms, without their money or influence. And in that moment, she realized that she had already won. Not because she had proven them wrong, but because she had proven herself right. Olivia Bennett never expected the moment her family would discover the truth about her success to be so ironically satisfying. For years, they had dismissed her, erased her from their lives, and confidently assumed she had faded into obscurity. In their minds, she was nothing more than a failed daughter who had made the worst mistake of her life by rejecting the family business. They had not spoken to her since the day they cut her off. And if they ever thought about her at all, it was with a mix of pity and certainty that she had learned her lesson the hard way. But life had a strange way of bringing the past back around. One morning, as Olivia sat in her Manhattan office, overlooking the city skyline, her assistant placed a magazine on her desk. It was the latest issue of Forbes, and right there on the cover, bold and unmistakable, was her name. Olivia Bennett, the visionary behind the future of sustainable design. Inside was a full feature about her meteoric rise in the industry, her company's rapid expansion, and the influence she had cultivated in reshaping modern interior spaces with sustainability at the core. For Olivia, it was just another feature in a long list of high-profile recognitions. But for her family, it was a complete shock to the system. On the other side of the city, in their sprawling estate, Jonathan Bennett, her father, sat in his mahogany-furnished office, sipping his morning coffee as he flipped through the pages of the magazine. His eyes stopped cold on a name he never thought he would see again in the world of business. Olivia. He read through the article, disbelief settling into every line of his face. His daughter, the one he had discarded, the one who had turned her back on Bennett Motors, had built a multi-million-dollar empire entirely on her own. She hadn't failed, she had thrived. The realization hit like a punch to the gut. He had believed, for years, that she would come crawling back, defeated and humbled, begging to be reinstated into the family. Instead, she had risen beyond anything he had imagined. Within an hour, word had spread throughout the entire family. Catherine Bennett, Olivia's mother, sat stunned in the family library, rereading the article as if the words might change if she looked at them long enough. Ryan, her younger brother, who had spent his life basking in their parents' favoritism, felt a bitter resentment creeping in. He had taken for granted that he was the golden child, the true heir to the family fortune. Yet, at this moment, it was Olivia's name on the cover of a national business magazine, not his. By the afternoon, Olivia's phone began buzzing. The first call came from a number she hadn't seen in years, her mother's. She let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, another call, this time from her father. Then Ryan. Then a series of texts, all variations of the same message. Olivia, we should talk. Let's meet up soon. We're so proud of what you've done. She could almost hear the desperation beneath the words, the realization that they had made a grave miscalculation. She ignored every single one. It wasn't long before the media picked up on the irony of the situation. Journalists who knew about the Bennett Motors legacy began connecting the dots. A few articles surfaced, speculating on the fact that Olivia, now one of the most sought-after interior designers in the world, had been cast out of her family years ago. While she had never spoken publicly about the estrangement, The timeline was obvious. She had been disowned, only to rise beyond the family's control. The whispers turned into full discussions. Did Bennett Motors make a mistake rejecting their own daughter? Olivia Bennett, the one that got away. The heiress they didn't want, now more successful than the family that abandoned her. The irony was almost poetic. The very family that had dismissed her was now being humiliated by their own short-sightedness in front of the business world. One evening, as Olivia wrapped up her day at the office, her assistant walked in, holding an envelope. This just arrived, hand-delivered. It was from Bennett Motors. Curious, she opened it, unfolding a formal business proposal from her father's company. The request? They wanted to hire her firm to redesign and modernize their showroom spaces. Bennett Motors, once a leader in the industry, was struggling to keep up with changing trends. Their sales had declined, their competitors had overtaken them, and they were desperate to rebrand as an environmentally conscious company to appeal to a younger generation of buyers. And they wanted Olivia to help them do it. She laughed. For years, they had pretended she didn't exist. Now, they were asking for her expertise because they had no better option. They were offering a lucrative contract, promising creative freedom, and, most telling of all, not a single mention of the past. It was clear they were hoping she would overlook everything that had happened. As if the years of rejection and betrayal could be erased with a simple business deal. She thought about how easy it would be to reject them outright. To turn them down and let them watch their empire crumble. A part of her wanted to send back a single-worded reply, no. But another part of her knew she had already won. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need their money. They had given her something far better than an apology or an inheritance. They had given her the chance to prove that she was never dependent on them to begin with. She slid the letter aside, leaned back in her chair, and smiled. She had spent years trying to earn their approval. But now, she realized she had never needed it. They were just another client. And whether she chose to help them or not, one thing was clear. Olivia Bennett had built something that no one, not even her own family, could take away from her. The downfall of Bennett Motors had been a long time coming. But for years, Jonathan Bennett refused to see it. He had built his company on the foundation of tradition, believing that the old ways of doing business would always be enough. He scoffed at the rise of electric vehicles, ignored the growing demand for sustainable production, and refused to invest in modernizing the company's infrastructure. While other brands evolved, embracing new technology and shifting consumer preferences, Bennett Motors remained stagnant, relying on its past reputation to carry it forward. For a while, it worked. The company's name still held prestige, and loyal customers continued to buy their cars out of habit rather than necessity. But the industry was changing faster than Jonathan anticipated. Competitors like Tesla, Rivian, and Lucid Motors were dominating the market, attracting the younger generation that Bennett Motors had failed to reach. The warning signs had been there for years: declining sales, shrinking market shares, and a growing disconnect between the brand and modern consumers. Jonathan's unwillingness to adapt finally caught up with him. A failed investment in hybrid technology had cost the company nearly $50 million, wiping out a significant portion of its liquidity. Meanwhile, outdated showroom designs and uninspiring marketing campaigns made their dealerships feel obsolete. Investors started pulling out, and for the first time in decades, the company faced a serious financial crisis. That was when reality struck. Sitting in the boardroom of Bennett Motors headquarters, Jonathan and his executives reviewed their latest sales numbers. And what they saw was devastating. Sales had plummeted by nearly 40% in the last fiscal year. And their biggest competitors were continuing to gain ground. The once powerful empire that had been in the family for 3 generations was now on the brink of collapse. "We need a solution," one of the executives said, his voice tight with tension. Another executive hesitated before speaking. "Sir, there is one option." Jonathan looked up, his patience already worn thin. "What is it?" The man cleared his throat before continuing. "We need to modernize. The market has shifted towards sustainability. And we need someone who understands that world." He paused. "Someone like Olivia." The name hit Jonathan like a slap to the face. Across the table, Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Catherine, who had remained silent throughout the meeting, suddenly straightened her posture. No one in the family had spoken Olivia's name in years. Jonathan exhaled sharply. "That's not an option," he said firmly. But the truth was, they had no other choice. Every consultant they had spoken to told them the same thing. They needed a radical rebranding strategy to survive. And there was no one better suited for the job than Olivia Bennet, the very daughter they had cut out of their lives. Jonathan clenched his jaw. He could hardly believe that the girl they had dismissed, the one they had assumed would fail without them, was now the key to saving their company. But there was no denying the numbers. Olivia's company, Bennet Interiors, was thriving. She had been featured in Forbes, Business Insider, and Architectural Digest as one of the most influential voices in sustainable design. Her client list included high-end hotels, Fortune 500 companies, and international luxury brands. She had built something real, something powerful, and now, she was in a position that Jonathan had never imagined. She held the leverage. Reluctantly, they reached out to her, drafting an official business proposal. They didn't mention the past, not the way they had disowned her, not the years of silence, not the way they had erased her from their lives. Instead, they made it strictly about business, offering a lucrative contract to help modernize their showrooms and bring their brand into the future. The letter was hand-delivered to Olivia's office. When she received it, she was sitting at her desk, reviewing design plans for a new hotel project in Miami. Her assistant placed the envelope in front of her with an unreadable expression. Olivia glanced at the sender and laughed. Bennet Motors. She leaned back in her chair, shaking her head at the irony. They had once told her she was nothing without them. Now, they needed her to save them. She opened the letter, reading through the carefully worded proposal. They were offering her a multi-million-dollar deal, complete creative control, and an opportunity to reshape the company's image on a national scale. Now, they were pretending as if the past never happened, as if they hadn't thrown her out and stripped her of her inheritance. For a moment, Olivia considered rejecting them outright. It would be easy to say no, to let them struggle, to watch as the company continued to spiral downward. It would be poetic justice. But then, something shifted in her mind. She didn't need revenge. She had already won. She had built something greater than they had ever believed she could. She had carved out a space in an industry that once overlooked her. She had proven herself, not to them, but to herself. And that was enough. She placed the letter down on her desk and smiled. They could wait. She had better things to do. For years, Olivia Bennet had lived in the shadow of her family's rejection. But now, the tables had turned. The same people who had once dismissed her, erased her from their lives, and confidently declared that she would fail without them were now desperately in need of her help. Bennet Motors, the very empire her father had been so proud of, was struggling to survive, and Olivia held the power to decide its fate. Sitting in her Manhattan office, she turned the crisp white business proposal from her father's company over in her hands. Rereading the details, they were offering her a multi-million-dollar contract, full creative control over the rebranding of their showrooms, and a chance to shape the future of Bennet Motors in a way they had never allowed her before. There was no mention of the past, no apology, no acknowledgement of the years they had spent pretending she didn't exist. Instead, it was written with the cold formality of a business transaction, as if they were offering a favor, not a plea for survival. For a long moment, she simply stared at the document, letting the weight of it sink in. She had spent years trying to earn their approval, but now, it was they who needed hers. Her phone buzzed beside her. Another message from Ryan. It was the third one today. "Hey, Liv, we should talk." She hadn't heard Ryan call her Liv since they were teenagers. Back then, he had been the golden child, the heir to the family business, the one their parents had always favored. He had never needed to try, never needed to prove himself. Everything had been handed to him. And yet, in the moment that mattered most, he had done nothing. He had sat silently at the family dinner table when their father disowned her. He had stood by and watched when their mother turned her back. He had done nothing while she was cast aside. And now, he wanted to talk, A part of Olivia considered responding, just to see what he would say. But another part of her already knew. He wasn't reaching out as a brother. He was reaching out because he was scared. Because he could feel the weight of his own failure pressing down on him. She placed her phone down without replying. Later that evening, as she sat in her high-rise apartment overlooking the city skyline, she thought about the little girl she had once been. The girl who had spent years trying to fit into a family that never truly accepted her. The girl who had watched her parents pour all of their love, effort, and resources into Ryan while expecting her to simply follow along. The girl who had fought for their respect, only to be cast aside when she dared to dream of something different. That girl was gone. Olivia wasn't the same person who had walked away from the Bennett estate with nothing but a suitcase and a dream. She was no longer the abandoned daughter, the family disgrace, the unwanted outsider. She had built something that no one, not even her powerful father, could take away from her. She had created her own name, forged her own legacy, and stepped into a life that was entirely her own. For a moment, she wondered what her younger self would think of her now. She imagined that girl, standing at the edge of an uncertain future, scared but determined, hoping that one day, she would prove that she was worth something. And Olivia knew, without a doubt, that she had. The next morning, she arrived at her office early, her assistant already waiting with her schedule for the day. Meetings, client calls, project reviews. Her company was thriving, and she had more important things to focus on than the ghosts of her past. Her assistant hesitated before speaking. Bennett Motors followed up again this morning. They'd like an answer soon. Olivia took a breath, considering her options. She could reject them outright, send back a cold, one-word reply that would remind them of exactly what they had lost. She could accept, but on her own terms, reshaping the company in a way that suited her, not them. She could demand an apology, force them to acknowledge the way they had treated her before even considering working with them. But then, she realized something. She didn't need their validation. For so long, she had imagined that proving them wrong would be the greatest victory. But now, as she sat here, successful and independent, she saw the truth. She had already won. It didn't matter if they admitted their mistakes. It didn't matter if they apologized. Their opinions, their regrets, their newfound desperation. None of it held any power over her anymore. She smiled, placing the contract aside. Let them wait, she said simply, turning back to her work. They needed her more than she would ever need them. And that, more than any revenge or recognition, was the greatest victory of all. Olivia Bennett's story is a powerful reminder that success is the best revenge. She was cast aside, underestimated, and told she would never make it without her family's support. But instead of letting their rejection define her, she chose to build her own future on her own terms. She didn't just prove them wrong. She proved to herself that she was capable of achieving greatness without their validation. This story teaches us valuable lessons. Never let others dictate your worth. Olivia's family believed she couldn't succeed without them. But she showed that self-belief and hard work matter more than privilege. Revenge isn't always about destruction, it's about thriving. She could have wasted time seeking vengeance. But instead, she focused on her success. That was the ultimate victory. The ones who reject you today may need you tomorrow. Olivia was disowned, yet in the end, her family had no choice but to seek her help. Life has a way of turning things around. If you loved this story and want more inspiring and dramatic tales of betrayal, resilience, and ultimate success, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Your support means everything.